Navy is taking over command from Border Force in the Channel under new government plans to tackle illegal immigration. The Prime Minister has also confirmed asylum seekers will be flown to Rwanda for processing as part of a £120 million deal. Boris Johnson says they'll have the capacity to resettle tens of thousands of people over the coming years, and the scheme will serve as a considerable deterrent. He told a news conference the partnership complies with international obligations, but he's still expecting a legal challenge.
Safe and legal routes for asylum while disrupting the business model of the gangs. Because it means that economic migrants taking advantage of the asylum system will not get to stay in the UK. We're confident that our new migration partnership is fully compliant with our international legal obligations. But nevertheless, we expect this will be challenged in the courts.
Well, Amnesty International UK is criticising the scheme. Refugee and Migrant Rights Director Steve Valdez-Simmons says it's similar to Australia's policy, which doesn't work and is too expensive.
Australia has not offshored, as it's called, anyone since 2014. But it has held on to its offshore facilities because it's been unable to shut them down, even though it's been trying since 2017 to do so. And it's been paying huge amounts of money, unfortunately, to do incredible amounts of cruelty to the relatively few people that it's offshored, while people have continued to arrive in Australia, including by boat.
Dozens of NHS patients have waited more than 3 years for hospital care in England because of the growing backlog. More than 6 million people are currently on the waiting list, with 23,000 waiting over 2 years to start routine treatment. Top surgeons are describing the data as shocking. Jo Goulding is a patient with rheumatoid arthritis and has been waiting for various surgeries since the summer of 2018. She says the delays are having a huge impact on her life.
This delay will have a long-lasting impact on me for the rest of my life because of the way that the joints now have deteriorated. It isn't just a case of a straightforward operation now, then there needs to be repairs. I don't expect special treatment. I don't want special treatment. I would just like to have fair access.
Russia is warning it will increase its military presence in the Baltic if Sweden and Finland join NATO. The two countries are on the verge of applying for membership. The deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, says if they do, the balance needs to be restored and there'll be no more talk of a nuclear-free region. More than 300 people have been killed in floods on South Africa's east coast. Heavy rains have blocked roads and disrupted shipping in Durban, one of Africa's busiest ports. The country's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, pledged to help after visiting families whose homes have been destroyed. It's been described as one of the worst flooding events in South Africa's history. The Queen, who has for the first time missed the Royal Maundy service, is also expected to miss the Easter Sunday service. Well, our royal reporter Cameron Walker joins us now from Windsor. And Cameron, just how significant is this and what's happened there today?
Yes, well, a source has confirmed to me that Her Majesty is expected to miss that Easter Sunday service here at Windsor Castle. She also missed the Royal Maundy service here today. Instead, Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall took her place. They replaced her. They were handing out Maundy money to local pensioners. Now, a source told me last week that the Queen felt that she was unable to commit. The orders of service needs to be printed, and she was keen to avoid any overshadowing or misrepresentation on the day. Of course, if she pulled out last minute, that would kind of shift the narrative towards the Queen's health. Now, we know that the Queen has got mobility issues at the moment. She's undertaken virtual engagements. She was at the Royal London Hospital last week virtually, at the Queen Elizabeth unit. She also met with foreign ambassadors virtually. But I think the challenge now for members in the royal household is prioritising which public events that Her Majesty will be attending. And no doubt their sights are firmly set on the Queen's Platinum Jubilee weekend in June.
OK, Cameron, thank you very much. GB News royal reporter Cameron Walker there, live in Windsor. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, though, let's return to Liam and On the Money.
And coming up during the first hour of today's 2-hour On the Money special, where we're focused on the cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. We're talking rents, because rents are soaring way ahead of inflation, and a new report reveals that hundreds of thousands of rental properties are posing health and safety risks to their tenants. So we're asking, is the UK rental market fit for purpose? Plus, we look at the meagre rise in the basic state pension. For some, it's just pennies each week, despite the spiralling cost of living crisis. Many of you aren't impressed. And today, it's Startup Britain, where we celebrate some of Britain's freshest new companies. Today, we're talking to the owner of a Kent-based bakery who founded his company while on furlough, turning the lockdown baking craze into a business. Gareth Smith of Eden Bakes will be talking about making dough from dough and the taste of sweet success. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? Are you renting a property that's awful? Will the landlord not do anything to help you? Are you sick and tired of tiny pension rises that lag the cost of living increase? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. But stay with us, because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on the money. Now, earlier this week, On the Money highlighted that the price of buying a home grew on average by an astonishing 14.3% during the year to March, the fastest growth rate for almost 20 years. Nice if you're an owner-occupier, or if you've got a portfolio of buy-to-let properties. Bad if you're a young adult still living in your childhood bedroom, or a young couple keen to start a family and sick and tired of sharing with friends. If you can't buy, though, as so many can't these days, the price of renting a home is also soaring. Rents outside London have climbed 10.8% over the last year and are now £1,088 a month on average. That's 15% higher than before the pandemic. In London itself, rents are up 14.3% over the last 12 months, now averaging £2,193 a month, a record high. Over the last quarter century or so, as house prices in Britain have surged, with so many young adults priced out of property ownership, the numbers of households privately renting has doubled from about 10 to 20%. But rents are now soaring as buy-to-let landlords, many using a single property as a pension, have taken advantage of a rising market to sell. That reduces the number of homes available for tenants to rent. And at the same time, there are rising concerns many rental properties are substandard. No less than 13% of UK private rentals, quotes, pose a serious threat to the health and safety of those living in them. That's according to the House of Commons Public Accounts Committee. Plus, tenants trying to challenge landlords face a court process that's inaccessible, arduous and resource-intensive, says that cross-party committee of MPs in a report published just yesterday. The National Residential Landlords Association backs this report, and it condemns the quality of some private rented accommodation. But not only are too many rentals substandard, there just aren't enough properties per se, causing rents to spiral amidst a broader cost of living squeeze. And that's our first On the Money question today. The UK's private rental market. Is it fit for purpose? As always, a host of people here on The Money, having grown-up discussions who really know their stuff. I'm just delighted to be joined today by Sophie Dellamoff. She's Public Affairs Manager at Generation Rent. That's a campaign group, mainly of youngsters pushing for more properties to be built. They're sick and tired of renting, and who can blame them? Property expert Russell Quirk, another friend of the show, is with me. And in the studio, it's moneymagpie.com herself. It's Jasmine Birtles. Great to have you here as ever, Jasmine. Let's talk to you first, Sophie. You're more than welcome here on The Money. We focus on housing and rental issues a lot. Please engage with us. Tell your friends. How bad is this problem in terms of young people trying to rent? Not just in London and the South East, but across the country, whether it's in rural situations, urban situations, in terms of trying to get a rental property at a decent price.
Thank you very much, Liam. And yeah, coming here from Generation Rent, the national voice of private renters, And we've been coming across more and more issues about renters struggling right now in the private rented sector. As we know, there's 7% inflation and the energy crisis, and the cost of living has increased. But we found that these issues were before the cost of living crisis. Rent has been increasing a far faster rate than wage inflation. And that's been an issue across the board, not just in London, but in other places. And we need to think about the way in which we can change this system and create more housing for private renters. And especially, as you mentioned earlier, the quality of housing right now in the private rented sector is substandard. 1 out of 8 properties in the PRS have a Category 1 hazard, and 23% of PRS homes are non-decent. We need to think about how we can make these homes more decent, which we hope with the landlord register and the decent home standards, we can bring up the standard. However, the key issue here is renters are paying too much. And we need to think about how we can level the playing field for landlords and private tenants. And one of these key issues would be having more private rented homes that are more affordable, thinking about also having more social housing as well, and building more homes that are affordable, as well as more safe and secure and affordable homes for all.
Russell Quirk, let's bring you in. You're a property industry expert. Great to have you on the show as ever. So I said in London and the South East, rents are up 14%, 14.3% year on year in March. In the North East, they're up 10%, more than the rate of inflation. In Wales, they're up 13.9%, more than the rate of inflation. In every single part of the country, whether it's the East Midlands, Scotland up 11.2%, rents are up quite a lot more than the rate of inflation. Surely we need to build more homes.
Well, look, Liam, you and I have rehearsed this a few times. Look, we absolutely do. And we need to build more homes for people to buy, and we need to build more homes for people to rent. The problem with the market, the way it is, of course, is that the majority of homes that are built in the UK, about 240,000 homes each year, the majority are for resale, and there's a much smaller amount that are built either for social housing or what we call build to rent, albeit the build to rent actually as a category, as a sector, is increasing quite significantly because there are some big institutions now, like Legal and General, that see a combination of capital appreciation and yield being quite attractive for them. But there's certainly not enough homes being built. But it's because we leave almost the entirety of housing supply in the UK to the top 10 house builders in Britain. And look, they're doing the job that their shareholders set them out to do, which is to provide a return. So I kind of cast no blame or any aspersions on those house builders. But if we leave the question of affordable homes, whether it's for purchase or for rent, simply to the free market, which, by the way, I'm a massive, massive, massive fan of, well, then, of course, we shouldn't be surprised when there's a lack of supply, and also, in particular, a lack of supply in the right places. And I've said on your show several times, I think, Liam, that government need to get their act together. They need to ensure that they now take the rental market and the affordable rent market in particular, and specifically build to rent by the scruff of the neck, and actually get involved with providing those homes themselves. And I don't just mean council houses, I mean properties that are built that are actually available, all the way from full market rent, all the way down through so-called affordable, which is about 80% of market rent, down to social level. So government, if they're really, really properly thinking about providing the right homes in the right places, they must do it themselves, because I'm afraid the consequence of the free market is that there are lots and lots of gaps.
That's a very considered view, Russell, and an expert view. You're a very respected property analyst in your own right, I must say, and I appreciate you saying all that. Jasmine, that is interesting, isn't it? Russell Quirk is a property professional. He's broadly on the centre-right. I'm actually chairing a lecture at the campaign group Shelter in the next week or so, and it's called The Centre-Right Case for Building More Social Housing. Yes. There seems to be such an emergency here that even people who like financial markets, like free markets, are saying the state has to really get more involved now, not so much with rent controls. Maybe you can tell us why you think they might be a bad idea, but with actually building more homes to rent and to buy.
Well, agreed, yes. And the terrible thing is we've been saying this for a few decades now. Over and over and over, there have been so many talks in government and outside saying we need more housing, and still we don't. I heard from a few years ago somebody from the Builders Federation saying that we need more social housing because builders, understandably, they won't build unless they know it's going to sell. So, you know, the obvious one that they've already sold would be social housing. And certainly, as Russell points out, anything that's government-backed, builders would be like, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to be there, because they know they're going to get paid. So there's that. But as Russell points out, if you leave it to the market, then you're going to have these huge things in, you know, the city of London, which have nobody living in them. They're all bought by people in Singapore and China and Hong Kong.
Just warehouse money, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you and I agree on most things. I slightly disagree with you on the nuance of what you said. I know we're on TV and you got to talk fast and cover a lot of ground, but I don't think builders only build if they know it's going to sell. I think our big builders, Russell Quirk referred to the fact that our biggest builders really dominate the market. The top 10 builders build almost 70% of the houses for private sale now. I think they deliberately build slowly, and I've written lots on why that is, and they will deny that.
Yes, of
but
course.
A lot of people agree with me on that now. House of Lords select committees, a lot of ministers, but that's another conversation. Very interesting discussion. Sophie, let's go back to you. I just want to ask you, you're a young person, you're a very smart person. I know from my own kids' experience and so on, there are lots of young people who are in rented accommodation, aren't there, who want to move on with their lives. It's all very well renting in your 20s with your mates, and it's great fun. It's a rite of passage, and who wouldn't want that? But it strikes me that the lack of decent rental homes on stable rents, and indeed the inability of lots of people, with all due respect, Sophie, of your generation, to progress from renting to buying, it's now messing with our demography. It's now messing with fertility. It's stopping young people having families. Am I overstating the case?
No, I think it's a key issue. Lots of private renters right now want to enter into the home ownership market. However, stamp duty holidays and also Help to Buy has actually propped up the market so much that lots of different individuals who would like to buy are unable to do so. And this also is, I'm a private renter. The inability we now have to actually save for a mortgage, especially when you're by yourself as well. So many different individuals and the private rented sector is not a homogenous group, are finding it very difficult to enter into that market. And as you mentioned, those financial issues do then have an impact on our society. But for now, we need to think about how we can improve the private rented sector and think about how we can make it safe for those people who are now living in it and likely to live in it for the rest of our lives, basically.
Very interesting. Well, Sophie, stay with us. And indeed, Russell and Jasmine, we are going to carry on this important discussion after the break. We're also going to be joined by a landlords association. Your emails are flooding in thick and fast. This is always a really important topic. People worried about renting. People are worried about whether their kids can buy or rent a house. We'll read out some of those shortly. Stay with us. You're on the money.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back, you're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. We're discussing, is the UK private rental market fit for purpose? Rents in London are now up 14.9% on this time last year. Across the country as a whole, it's about 11%, far higher than the rate of inflation, the rate at which the broader cost of living is rising. And a new report from the Public Accounts Committee, a cross-party committee of MPs, says that 13% of UK rental homes are, quote, posing dangers to the health and safety of their tenants. We just heard from Sophie Dellamoff, who is from Generation Rent. She'll be back with us again soon. Let's go back to Russell Quirk, who is a well-known property professional. Russell, it strikes me that there does seem to really be a case now for government to get involved. For me, it's all about, if you want to build more homes, it's all about the market for land. I would say that the state has to start selling its own land, parcelling up land, selling service plots to builders, because there's just too much land otherwise in the hands of big developers who don't want to build out quickly enough. Would you disagree with that?
No, I definitely agree that more needs to be built, both from a resale perspective and a rental perspective. And there is a very straightforward way of doing that. I mean, not necessarily government kind of picking up trowels and spirit levels themselves and building homes, although actually I don't see anything wrong with them actually commissioning construction businesses on public land to do exactly that. But what they could do is what they've done with social housing over the years, although it's a kind of bit of a blunt instrument by way of Section 106 agreements, they could actually make developments that they give planning permission for at local authority level, let's say above a certain threshold of homes, 50 homes or whatever it might be, they could actually mandate that there is a certain amount of build to rent. So in other words, properties that are specifically for rental built. But I think with that, Liam, what we need to do, we need to stop demonising renting. And I'm not suggesting we're doing that, but I think generally there is this kind of two-tier property market where it's seen that you're kind of up here insofar as a house buyer, but if you're a renter, you're almost seen as a bit of a second-class citizen. I think that's completely wrong. The house I'm sitting in right now, I rent. I am a renter. It's a nice house, but I rent. There's nothing wrong with it. But what government needs to do then is also make it better and more accessible for renters in terms of tenure. So rather than 12-month short tenancy agreements, there needs to be the ability, like we see in Germany, to lay down roots. In other words, to agree with the landlord, let's say a 10-year deal or a 20-year deal with certain breaks. But the other thing is, very quickly as well, let's also not throw landlords under the bus, because there's an inference in the media, I think, that landlords are generally bad and greedy. 99% of landlords, in my huge experience, are ordinary people with just 2 or 3 properties, just trying to do their best and to earn a living out of those properties. But they also care about tenants. They care about their properties. So we hear headlines sometimes around substandard properties and nasty landlords putting rents up, given, of course, that landlords are under the same inflationary pressures as everybody else in every respect. So I think the more we push landlords out the door, no pun intended, the more of a shortage we're going to have, because those landlords will simply run for the hills and start investing in other asset classes. And that's the last thing we want.
I agree with a lot of that, Russell. I think it's inevitable that people will want to own. If you own a property, you have more freedom. You can collateralise it. You can borrow against it. You aren't at the whim of a landlord, even under a longer tenancy. And I also completely agree with you. So many of our landlords now have one property. I think the average buy-to-let portfolio is something like 1.4 properties, and of course there's some people with hundreds. So the average many rented properties are, a couple who buy a house, then don't sell it when they move to their next house, and that is their pension, because of course pensions have been monstered under many headings over recent years. Jasmine, to what extent do you think the government understands this? You're in touch with lots of people in the government, so am I. It strikes me that the party that it's hard to solve this housing issue. It's going to take many decades. But the party that really grabs this housing issue by the neck, the party that gives hope to very articulate, smart, young professional people like Sophie from Generation Rent, who I'm about to come back to, that they actually care about them and want them to help to buy their own home and get a better deal from their landlord, not having to spend half or even 2/3 of their entire income in their 20s on rent for a single room in a shared house. The party that does that will win the next general election and will deserve to win the next general election.
That's a very good point, because, as you say, housing is a fundamental issue. And, we have a double problem with mortgages, just the price of a house being astronomical. Most parents, I think, are looking at the future and thinking, my children will never be able to afford a house. But on the other hand, the rent. And if they, as you say, if they could grasp it, and I think it does mean so really getting hands-on, as Russell said, for the government to get hands-on and have a multidisciplinary approach. So you are looking at building more, you're looking at better, I wouldn't say necessarily rent controls, but better controls on the landlords on what they must do, because, as you say, 13% of these properties.
But the best way to make people behave properly in a capitalist society is competition. If there were more rental properties, then landlords would know they have to treat their tenants better, because the tenants have got choice. If tenants have choice, hey presto, landlords start behaving.
Yes, again, as been said, if we could have more buy to rent, that would help. I am also a bit concerned about these big companies becoming landlords. I mean, we've heard about L&G, but also there's
big
Lloyds,
insurers,
yes, even
big
John
retailers
Lewis.
like John Lewis.
Weird. It's an odd thing, and as you say, it's actually quite often better to have just a couple who live round the corner, perhaps, who care. I'm also concerned about landlords who live on the other side of the world. Should we look at this? Should we actually have some rules for those who are not physically here to make sure that they're actually keeping it going?
Well, we should say we did ask to talk to the National Residential Landlords Association. Their press release, they do very much endorse that report from the Public Accounts Committee I mentioned earlier, that the report itself condemns the 13% of rental properties in the UK that, in the words of those MPs, pose a threat to the health and safety of tenants. Unfortunately, the Residential Landlords Association is just having trouble with their tech getting through on the programme, but we'll get them back another time. Let's go back to Sophie Dellamoff from Generation Rent. Sophie, as I said, I've got a lot of respect for Generation Rent yourselves. There's another campaign group, Priced Out. There's another campaign group called the Yimbies, Yes in My Backyard. Lots of young people. You're not only complaining, I know, you're also putting forward policy proposals. You're lobbying ministers. You're appearing on programmes like this and in the press. What do you think of rent controls?
We need to think about rent controls in relation to the wider situation, and we need to think about when rent increases are going up so rapidly, not necessarily just thinking about market rates, but also wage inflation at the same time. Generation Rent want to look at the system holistically, and I think what we need to think about more is kind of the building of housing and affordable housing, and also thinking about having a more secure situation for renters within their homes. So one of the things and the key policy areas that we're looking into is the ending of Section 21. So that means that people feel more secure in their homes and are less likely to be forced to leave for no reason. So this means that they can ask for kind of repairs to be done without the fear of a retaliatory eviction. And these are the kind of key issues that we're focusing on and working with the government to be working on. I think we need to think more about the kind of the level of social housing in this country and thinking about that more holistically.
Well, Sophie, thanks a lot for appearing here on The Money. Sophie Dellamoff there of Generation Rent, and indeed Russell Quirk. A good discussion. We will return to this. This is high very much in terms of the issues that I personally think is of massive importance to people across the UK, not least younger people. It's not covered nearly enough on the mainstream media, in my view. So thank you both for a good discussion. And Jasmine is staying with us, of course. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we're talking to Age UK about those increases in the basic state pension. Pretty meagre, many of you think, and what a difference they really will make. Plus, in today's Startup Britain, we talk to the owner of a Kent-based bakery who started his business straight from his kitchen table. It's a husband and wife story. It's all about baking during lockdown and making that into a business. All that after the GB News headlines with Townsend Roberts.
Liam, thank you. It's 1:31. Here are the headlines from the GB Newsroom. The Royal Navy is taking over command from Border Force in the Channel under new government plans to tackle illegal immigration. The Prime Minister has also confirmed asylum seekers will be flown to Rwanda for processing as part of a £120 million deal. Boris Johnson says they'll have the capacity to resettle tens of thousands of people over the coming years and that the scheme will serve as a considerable deterrent. Ambulance response times and the performance of A&E in England have dropped to their lowest levels on record. That's as the latest figures show 6.2 million patients are currently on NHS waiting lists, with 23,000 waiting over 2 years to start routine treatment. Russia is warning it will increase its military presence in the Baltic if Sweden and Finland join NATO. The two countries are on the verge of applying for membership. The deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, says if they do, the balance needs to be restored and there'll be no more talk of a nuclear-free region. The Queen, who has for the first time missed the Royal Maundy service, is also expected to miss the Easter Sunday service this weekend because of mobility issues. The Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall represented the monarch at today's event, which was held at the chapel in Windsor Castle. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. In just a moment, it's back to Liam and On the Money.
Hello. Things are warming up for the start of the long weekend. Certainly today it's getting a little warmer out there, dry and bright for the most part. And for Good Friday, it's also looking warmer still. High pressure is in control. It's not quite sitting right over us and keeping the weather fronts completely at bay. At times, these weather fronts are going to try and push in from the west, and certainly one today is bringing more cloud and a bit of patchy rain over the Western Isles, maybe on the west coast of the mainland of Scotland, and also maybe the far north of Northern Ireland, seeing a few spots of drizzly rain. But for the vast majority, it is dry. Quite a lot of cloud this morning, but it is melting away through the afternoon, and many places seeing some sunny spells. A few coasts in the west may stay a little misty and murky, and that'll suppress the temperatures. But in the sunny spells, high teens, low 20s possible across the southeast, so really quite warm. A little bit more of that showery rain drifting northwards across northern Scotland through the evening, but for the most, it'll be a dry night and a clear night. Cloud will start to increase once more across South Wales, southwest England, perhaps a little bit of mist and low cloud here and there first thing on Good Friday as temperatures drop down into high single figures, so not particularly chilly. And for most, Good Friday is looking like a dry and a bright day, probably more sunshine than today, certainly over the Midlands, northern England and northwest Scotland. Some patchy cloud further west, and we will see a lot of cloud for Northern Ireland, some showers breaking out here. 1 or 2 showers possible North Wales, and later on Northern England and southern Scotland could see a heavy shower, but they'll be pretty isolated. Most places dry and temperatures 22, maybe 23 Celsius across the southeast. A little cooler on some of these eastern coasts and with a bit more cloud further west. Still 1 or 2 of those showers moving in during Friday evening across southern and then central Scotland. A possibility of a heavier shower here for a time. 1 or 2 showers possible on Saturday, but most places again dry and bright. Some rain in Northern Ireland on Sunday and turning cooler with a bit more rain around by Monday.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, on Monday, the basic state pension rose by 3.1%, amounting to just £5.55 more a week for those on state pensions since April 2016, and just £4.25 a week more if you reach state pension age before that date. And for some pensioners, those entitled to what's called the age addition, a bonus for the over 80s, that increase amounted to just pennies extra each week. Pensioners are calling the basic state pension increase insulting amid a cost of living crisis and the price of essentials rising daily. And joining me to talk about this crucial issue is Chris Brooks, Head of Policy for Age Concern, of course, very distinguished charity helping to combat elderly poverty, and Jasmine Birtles, MissMoneyMagpie.com, personal finance expert in her own right, is still with us. Chris, what does Age UK think about these pension increases? Just a 3.1% rise at a time when even official inflation is forecast to be almost 8% over the coming year.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, and thanks for the introduction. It's obviously woefully insufficient to help many pensioners make ends meet. It's less than half of the present inflation rate. So many people, we're hearing from a lot of people who are simply unable to afford the even household essentials in many cases, and are having to take really difficult decisions about what they spend their money on. Obviously, the rate itself was set back in September. It's based on the September inflation figures, which is why there's such a huge gap. So it's really important that the government takes measures to tackle what's been a huge increase in prices since that time. It was quite unfortunate, actually, that the rise is based on September, which was soon before inflation really started rocketing and just before the energy crisis really kicked off. So it's really important that the government takes some measures to tackle this and to help the people who are suffering. In many cases, it's people on lower incomes, it's pensioners who are reliant on the state pension, who are just really struggling to pay for food, pay for essential services. Although the weather's warmed up now, so we're not talking about heating so much, it's still really important that people can maintain their standard of living and don't have to scrimp and save as much as we're hearing.
There is a sense, I think, that the elder generation, they've done pretty well. They own houses. Young people don't own houses. We've been talking about that earlier during this show. They got lots of cash. They go on cruises. The government scrapped the triple lock, didn't it, with the coalition era guarantee that pensions would rise, the basic state pension, by either the increase in the rate of inflation, earnings, or 2.5%, whichever is greater. But it's important to say, even though there are some wealthy pensioner households, quite a lot of our pensioners are very comfortably off. There is still in the UK deep pockets of pensioner poverty. There is still deprivation among our elderly. This sense that the baby boomer generation have got it really good and everyone else is suffering. That's not right, is it?
No, you're absolutely right. There are obviously some pensioners who have a bit more money. Maybe they own their own house. Maybe they have other assets as well. But there's still about 1 in 6 pensioners live in poverty. And the vast majority of people are on very modest incomes and are just about managing to get by. So it's really important that we do correct this perception of wealthy baby boomers having it all and trying to have their cake and eat it. So yeah, absolutely. It's about protecting people on the lowest incomes. It's about making sure that people in the lower income group, people who are reliant on the state pension and may well be claiming pension credit as well, can afford to get by. And at the moment, what we're hearing is just really difficult for a lot of people, which is why we need to see more action from the government. It was sorely missing from the spring statement, which the Chancellor delivered a few weeks ago. And we're hoping that there's still the opportunity for the government to correct this, put it right, and help millions of pensioners.
6 pensioners in poverty, says Age UK, and more to come, one assumes, given that the rise in the basic state pension is so much less than the increase in the cost of living. Do you think there'll be another sort of emergency budget?
I'm hoping so, because I was also very disappointed by the spring statement. I really thought that something would come out of it to help us just with our energy bills, if nothing else. And for the elderly, energy bills are really, really important, of course. Many of them need to stay much warmer than you would if you were younger. It is, it's still
chilly.
Yes, it's true, it's true. I was thinking like you were, that you do have some very, very wealthy pensioners. And as you say, they've done very well in many cases, free education, free healthcare, etc. But, 1 in 6,
it's a lot.
It is a lot, and it does need to be dealt with. When I speak to people about managing their money, I always say, ignore the state pension, just assume it's not going to be there when you retire. But we have a lot of retired people, have millions of people who really are just living off that. So, yeah.
Chris Brooks, Age UK, you guys know your way around government. You're very effective behind the scenes at lobbying. Are you hearing anything more about, perhaps after these local elections coming up in early May, in which the polls show the Tories aren't going to do too well? Do you think we could see more help, an emergency summer budget, given these increases in the cost of living, with benefits, not least pensions, not keeping up?
We're still very hopeful that the government will be able to put some measures in place to help people. So it's possible to make changes to benefit uprating even in the middle of the year, and other organisations have been calling for some of next year's rise to be brought forward, for instance. So that's just one example of where we could see the government take action. It's possible to do that in the middle of the year, so we could see something over the summer. But it's absolutely essential that some help is delivered as soon as possible, just because so many people are now really struggling and finding this current situation really tough. And as you said, inflation is predicted to get even higher, so it's going to get worse yet. And incomes aren't keeping up. So something happens. We've been calling for the government to put in place what's effectively a £500 grant to people, the poorest pensioners, and the poorer income groups below state pension age as well. So not just pensioners who are struggling. But so everybody who would be eligible for the cold weather payment should receive £500, which would provide a huge amount of relief to people at the moment. It would be really beneficial, I think, and we hope that the Chancellor will be able to do that. We think it's absolutely in everyone's interest that it happens, and the sooner the better.
Chris, thanks a lot for talking us. Chris Brooks from Age UK. Let's see what happens if there is any extra support for pensioners. I just want to return to a subject we were talking about at the top of the hour, the state of the UK private rental market. We had that report from the Commons Public Accounts Committee saying that pretty much 1 in 8 of British private rented properties are posing a threat to the health and safety, quotes, of their tenants. Let's bring Richard Black in now, who is a landlord and property developer. I'm sorry we couldn't get you up on the show earlier, Richard. We had a few technical problems. To what extent do you think that's fair, what the House of Commons Public Affairs Select Committee said about the state of private rental properties in the UK?
Do I think it's fair? I don't know of any landlord that allows their house to fall into disrepair. The legislation like that is not. There's so much rigidity in the system now, but the market is completely decoupled anyway from realistic kind of need or desire. It's not fit for purpose. On my podcast earlier this week, we had Johnny Irwin, the property TV presenter, who quite clearly said that we've got a situation where landlords are held out to be the bad guys, and are equally the bad guys. The word unscrupulous is often put in front of the word landlord in TV scripts, in newspaper items, but actually all too often, the landlord has done his or her level best to provide a decent house for a decent sum of money to somebody that would like to live there, and that's how I look at it.
I think that's fair, Richard. I think, in my experience, the majority of landlords in the UK are decent people who treat tenants fairly. Often landlords are, a couple with one buy-to-let property. That is their pension. They often live around the corner. They often really care about their tenants. But in the end, in a free market, the way to make people behave properly is not so much regulation as competition. If tenants had more choice, if there were more rental properties, then rents would be more affordable. You referred to that yourself. There are many young people spending half, even 2/3 of their income on rent if they want to live in one of our bigger cities to develop their careers. That's unsustainable. So do you think we should be building more rental properties?
We should be building or creating more properties, full stop, Liam. I've always been an advocate of that. As somebody that for 25 years has developed houses of all kinds, I mean, I see, I take old rubbish houses and turn them into something worthwhile and then sell them on to people that want to live there. I'm not the sort of developer that grabs a field and builds a whole 150 houses on it and then cuts and runs. I always see value in buildings, and we've got countless buildings, brownfield sites in this country that we could be using that are now empty because so many people are working from home. We've got old plots of land in town centres, city centres that are going to, just sitting there stagnant. There is the space, in my view, in England, in the United Kingdom, to build more houses in the right place. But also what's frustrating is they have to be what we want rather than what we should be telling people to buy. I'm often sort of cautious about the standard and quality of certain builds that I see. And I'm seeing people buying them because it almost feels like that's what they're told they want to buy, what they want at all.
Richard, let's leave it there. We've got the gist of what you've been saying. The connection's still a little bit ropey. We'll get you on another time when the connection's a little bit better. Great to have you on the show. Perhaps you can come into the studio next time. We can have a proper chat. Richard Black there, a property developer, giving a landlord's perspective on this latest report from the Commons Public Accounts Committee into the state of UK rental properties. 13% posing a threat to the health and safety of their tenants. And we will, of course, return to that subject, whether or not the UK's private rental market is fit for purpose, here on The Money. But now it's time for something else, because it's time for Startup Britain. And that's the feature where we speak to some of Britain's best new companies. The pandemic, of course, plunged our economy into a deep slowdown and many were furloughed from their jobs. Well, Gareth Smith and his wife, Stanfie, they were both furloughed, but they used that time to start their own bakery business, straight from their kitchen. They took the lockdown baking craze and turned it into a new company. They delivered cakes, desserts, pastries all around the town of Edenbridge in Kent, bringing a sense of community during those tough lockdown months. And since then, Eden Bakes has gone from strength to strength. Gareth and Stanfie now in their own local high street shop. But their business journey hasn't always been easy. Business startups rarely are. I should know. And here to tell us more, it's Gareth Smith, my latest guest on Startup Britain.
Thanks, mate.
Gareth, great to have you in the studio.
Nice
you
to meet
are our
you, Liam.
latest Startup Britain guest.
Certainly am.
Have you always liked cooking?
I don't cook. So, first of all, Stephanie is my wife.
My apologies.
And she's the main. She makes everything.
Okay.
I just fill in the gaps. I'm the glue to it.
So when did you realise that your wife's there baking, you're eating the cakes, not too many, you're nice.
Lots of them, less than I used to be.
Nice and slim. And you start delivering these cakes to local people, presumably first to neighbours, then across the town. When did you realise, hey up, there's a business here?
Pretty much straight away. It was right within the pandemic, so everyone's emotions were high, and everyone's kind of got an affinity for us because when you're delivering, you're meeting people, you're getting close, and the overall feel of what we were doing was liked, and people really loved it.
You got a good feeling about the. So, what kind of products do you make? Bread? Do you make just cakes, buns?
Cakes, pastries, bundle boxes, like breakfast brunch boxes. We do platters, so we do catering side of things. We do pick your own platter bundle on our website, so you can build your own straight off, no messing, just order them straight on the website.
And Stephanie, apologise, Stephanie, for getting your name wrong. It's not his fault. It's not Gareth's fault. It's my fault. Blame me. So she is obviously the driving force of this business in terms of the production, and I guess you've been overseeing the delivery and so on. Is she a professional cook, or she's just really good at cooking anyway?
She's a trained chef straight from college.
And she was literally using, presumably in your kitchen, you just got your home kitchen, you got one oven, like pretty much every other household.
And that broke pretty quickly.
Yeah, because you must have been using it round the clock pretty much.
So we replaced.
Yeah.
And eventually it just went, well, I say eventually, within 3 weeks it went.
And now you've got your own high street store.
Yes.
Tell me about that. What was it like to make the step from doing that to in your kitchen to taking risks? Presumably you had to borrow money and incorporate a company and take a high street store. Did you buy the store? Did you rent the store?
We didn't borrow any money. We earned the money.
Impressive.
From the start.
And you bought your own
nothing.
retail unit now?
We didn't buy the building. We bought the business.
Very good.
Somebody was moving away.
Okay.
So we bought the business. Before this, we lived opposite the business.
Oh, I see.
And it was empty for like 6 months, and we were like, we want this. And then somebody moved into it.
It's a big step. What were you doing before, with all respect?
I was working in marketing.
Okay.
Behind a desk.
Well, that's a good combination. You've got a professional chef and somebody who's into marketing, and you've created this fabulous brand.
So COVID came, and I was furloughed, and I was like, without all the horribleness that was going on, I was like, yes. So I laid on the floor. We both laid on the floor watching TV for 3 months, learning stuff, and we got bored pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And Steph started baking, and we thought, let's do this properly. Let's brand it all out. Let's get some proper adverts. Let's do this properly.
And how many ovens have you got now in your new bakery?
We've got a big oven.
Okay.
A really big oven.
But presumably a catering oven, a professional wholesale job. It's not.
Yeah, so we opened the shop November the 1st, and 4 weeks later, or just after Christmas, we had a flood through the ceiling, which ruined everything.
Oh, my God.
10 weeks later, brand new shop, everything brand new, everything back to normal again. So,
what's the future for Eden Bakes? How big could this go?
More shops.
Is that the next step, to get another branch?
It's not quite the next step. I can't tell you the next step yet.
Okay.
But more shops, possibly. Yeah.
And do you deliver? Do you do online?
We deliver.
Is it all you have to come in?
We deliver and the shop.
Okay.
So what we sell online is different to what's in the shop.
Okay.
So we've got catering, we've got cream teas, we've got cakes. You can buy that all online. You can come into the shop and buy them all.
And I have to ask, because so many people will be wondering, men and women, what's it like working with your wife?
Brilliant.
He means it.
Like a sword in the eye. You know?
I mean, you do seem to have complementary skills if you're doing the marketing side and the logistics side, and Stephanie's masterminding the production side.
It really works. Really works. I'm a big techie as well, so the online really appeals to me. So.
And you've got rising flour costs, rising cost of living,
rising cost of everything.
Presumably, you're having to put your prices up for consumers, but not by so much that you deter them. Difficult balance.
We're not going to put them up yet.
Okay.
We're going to keep it as it is for now and absorb that, because we're really community based, so we don't want to take it out of other people's mouths, you know. So.
Well, Gareth Smith, good luck to you, and indeed to Stephanie, and the best of luck to Eden Bakes.
Brilliant.
Thanks a lot for being my latest guest here.
Appreciate that.
On Startup Britain.
Brilliant.
What a fabulous story. Now, as well as the Startup Britain and other guests we have on this show, your voice is probably the most important. So let's bring in some of your views now from GB News viewers and listeners. Nick says, buy-to-let mortgages should be restricted to those residing in the UK and of UK citizenship. This will go a long way to stopping money laundering. Interesting perspective. Sean says it's always confusing to the people who live outside the London bubble to listen to the constant cries of a housing crisis. There are numerous houses to buy and rent here in the north. Now, there are in some parts of the north, but not in many of the cities and towns, Sean. And I have looked closely at that. I completely understand there is an over-focus on London and the South East, and we do try and address that, and we will continue to do so. Alex says, my rent's 60% of my income a month, and I don't get benefits. Many, many people are in that situation, and that's why I think we need to build more properties. Mark says, what happens when you retire and have to rent your home? You have to keep paying the cost for life. Mortgages have an end date, and after payment in full, you don't have a huge bill to blight your older life. Very, very true indeed. Thanks for all your emails. That's it for this hour, but stay with us as we have yet more on the money, you lucky people, after the break. So stay with us.
Coming up tomorrow at noon.
Welcome to a very special GB News Easter programme. We are invited during this short time to enter into the passion, death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's an invitation to take part in the most important part of the Christian life. Happy Easter. Alleluia.
The Meaning of Easter with Calvin Robinson tomorrow at noon on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome to the second hour of this On the Money special, where we're focused on Britain's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and during this hour, having just focused on the UK rental market, we're hitting another subject of vital importance to younger people, namely, is a university education financially worth it? We hold a detailed discussion. We also examine what UK trade deals with Australia and New Zealand could mean for British farmers. And On the Money will also reveal where in the UK investment is growing the fastest. You may be surprised at the answer. All that and more during your second hour of On the Money, after the GB News headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Liam, thank you. It's 2:01. Here are the headlines from the GB Newsroom. The Royal Navy is taking over command from Border Force in the Channel under new government plans to tackle illegal immigration. The Prime Minister has also confirmed asylum seekers will be flown to Rwanda for processing as part of a £120 million deal. Boris Johnson says they'll have the capacity to resettle tens of thousands of people over the coming years, and the scheme will serve as a considerable deterrent. He told a news conference the partnership complies with international obligations, but he's still expecting a legal challenge.
Safe and legal routes for asylum while disrupting the business model of the gangs. Because it means that economic migrants taking advantage of the asylum system will not get to stay in the UK. We're confident that our new migration partnership is fully compliant with our international legal obligations. But nevertheless, we expect this will be challenged in the courts.
Amnesty International UK is criticising the scheme. Refugee and Migrant Rights Director Steve Valdez-Simmons says it's similar to Australia's policy, which doesn't work and is too expensive.
Australia has not offshored, as it's called, anyone since 2014. But it has held on to its offshore facilities because it's been unable to shut them down, even though it's been trying since 2017 to do so. And it's been paying huge amounts of money, unfortunately, to do incredible amounts of cruelty to the relatively few people that it's offshored, while people have continued to arrive in Australia, including by boat.
Ambulance response times and A&E performance in England have dropped to their lowest levels on record. That's as the latest figures show 6.2 million patients are currently on NHS waiting lists, with 23,000 waiting more than 2 years to start routine treatment. Top surgeons are describing the data as shocking. Dr Bob Gill says a decade of underfunding is to blame.
There's been real terms shrinkage in the wages of doctors and nurses, anything up to 15 to 20%. So the NHS is not retaining staff. We had Brexit, which led to a bit of an exodus of European staff within the NHS. And we've also had a massive reduction in NHS bed capacity. So without the staff, without the funding, and without the bed capacity, it's rational that the waiting lists are going to rise.
Well, Joe Goulding is a patient with rheumatoid arthritis and has been waiting for various surgeries since the summer of 2018.
This delay will have a long-lasting impact on me for the rest of my life because of the way that the joints now have deteriorated. It isn't just a case of a straightforward operation now, then there needs to be repairs. I don't expect special treatment. I don't want special treatment. I would just like to have fair access.
The UK's medicines regulator has approved the use of the COVID Moderna vaccine in children aged between 6 and 11 years old. Earlier today, a sixth coronavirus vaccine produced by French firm Valneva was also given the green light. The UK is the first country in the world to approve the jab. Russia is warning it will increase its military presence in the Baltic if Sweden and Finland join NATO. The two countries are on the verge of applying for membership. The deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, says if they do, the balance needs to be restored and there'll be no more talk of a nuclear-free region. Meanwhile, Ukraine says a new prisoner swap has been agreed with Russia. 30 Ukrainians are due to return home today. While earlier the country's military said it hit Russian warship Moskva with a missile, causing serious damage. It reportedly started to sink after ammunition on board the vessel exploded. Moscow claims it's still afloat, but says crew members were evacuated from the ship. The Queen is expected to miss the traditional Easter Sunday service at Windsor Castle this weekend because of mobility issues. It's after she missed today's Royal Maundy service for the first time. The Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall represented the monarch at the event, distributing money to community members from across the country. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now let's return, though, to Liam and On the Money.
And coming up on the money, as interest rates on student loans soar to a shocking 12%, On the Money asks, is a university education financially worth it? We also reveal where in the UK investment is growing the fastest. You may be surprised. Plus, each day On the Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. Today we're talking to a trade economist, Kathryn Mcbride. She'll be talking about what UK trade deals with Australia and New Zealand mean. Cheaper prices for consumers maybe, but should producers, farmers be fearful? That's later in the show. And keep those emails coming. We'll read out some later. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. Stay with us for this next hour because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan and you're still on the money. Renting a property in the UK is increasingly expensive, as we've just been discussing. Another trend hitting youngsters hard is the cost of higher education. And that raises a question many young adults and their parents are increasingly asking. Does it make financial sense to go to university? The interest rate on student loans is set to more than double in England and Wales. That's according to the highly respected Institute for Fiscal Studies. There's no good reason, the IFS says, for these eye-watering increases during a cost of living crisis. Graduates earning £49,310 or more a year will see interest rates on their student loans increase from 4.5% to 12% this autumn, says the IFS. That's because loan rates are set at the Retail Price Index, a measure of inflation which just hit 9% plus 3% on top of that. And for lower income workers too, student loan interest rates are set to rise from 1.5% to 9%. A record 450,000 domestic students started degree courses last September. But amidst frustration at online learning, which some think is a ruse to just save money, more and more youngsters are now questioning whether they should go to university in the first place. Britain's lagged for years when it comes to vocational education. The German apprenticeship system develops and celebrates practical know-how. It's not seen inferior to academic qualifications, but that doesn't happen here. And with around half of young people now attending university, are standards slipping? Well, the government regulator, the Office for Students, warns it will fine universities for running poor quality courses, so-called Mickey Mouse degrees. And so, as the cost of student loans soars, here's our second On the Money question today. A university education, is it really worth it? As ever, in-depth discussions here on this show with people who know their stuff. That's why we've got Bobby Siegel. He's back. He's a maths teacher, author and quizmaster. He's in the studio with us. We also have, making the counter case, it's Connor Cotton. He's the managing director of a website called Not Going to Uni. We also have Jasmine Birtles here in the studio. And we've also got Neve Robinson, who's editor-in-chief at Impact Student magazine. Great to have all of you with us. Bobby, let's come to you first. You're a well-known educationalist. What is the case for going to university? Have you seen the price of these student loans?
Yes, of course. Again, as a teacher, this is a conversation I have with my students quite frequently. In fact, just before Easter, I had a pretty much the same conversation. I'm sure when I come back next week, my students going to say, "Oh, see, Mr. Seagull, I told you, university is really expensive." And I think we have to acknowledge, first of all, it is a cost. But the reality of life is, it's like there's a balancing scale. You decide it is expensive, but what are the pros of going to university? Obviously, for some students who love academics, they want to spend 3-4 years studying French literature or understanding about Japanese culture, fine, university is a great place. And for others, it's the option of developing a real vocational qualification, for example, architecture or medicine.
And you know how that's going to turn into cash money, right?
Yes.
And get that return on that investment.
Yes. But then obviously on the flip side, it's when university doesn't clearly pay financially. And that's where you have to think, what are the other benefits that university can bring? And I think it's where you look at things like the human, social and cultural capital. So some of my students, even if they get a good degree, they're not necessarily guaranteed to get a good job because they may not have the cultural capital one needs to access, let's say, banking or top law jobs in law firms. So actually, it's a quite a complex question.
Let's turn to Neve Robinson. She is editor-in-chief at Impact Student magazine. Neve, I was lucky enough to benefit from a free university education, both undergrad and postgrad. Your generation isn't. What do you think of the fact that you could soon be paying, well, you will soon be paying 12% on a student loan? That sounds like usury to me.
Hi Liam, yes, thank you for having me on the show. I think you're absolutely correct. It definitely is a concern to a lot of students. And in particular, higher earning students, this new interest increase is likely to mean that they could be paying off their loans for much longer and over their lifetime. That really could accrue to thousands of extra pounds of repayments. And so I do think it adds an extra element. I myself am a huge proponent for the benefits of university. It's been an incredible opportunity to meet different people from a variety of backgrounds, to learn more about yourself, to develop. But by implementing these kind of interest rate increases, it may put off students who would hugely benefit from the opportunity to attend a university institution.
Neve, let me ask you, to what extent are people, your friends, your colleagues at university, talking about this interest rate increase? We should make clear it isn't a long-standing increase. A cap comes in 2023, but it still means if you've got a £50,000 student loan, which isn't unusual, if interest rates go up, you're talking about an extra £3,000 of interest that a young professional person who's graduated has to find over just 6 months. Are people noticing in the pubs and the clubs and indeed the lecture theatres, if you ever actually go to any lectures?
Go to a few. And yes, people are noticing. But I think perhaps the most concerning thing is that not everyone is fully aware of the implications of this. So they'll just see that interest rates are increasing, but they won't know what the full long-term effect of that is for them. For some people, this may not actually have a great impact at all. For others, it could have a really concerning impact on their repayments. I think what it is doing is it's serving as a deterrent to those who don't really understand the system. All they're seeing is this huge spike to potentially 12% in interest rates. And if they don't have a teacher or someone who's informed to really explain to them the pros and the cons of the situation, they may just decide not to attend university. And that actually could be a real loss to sort of society as a whole, to the system. And it is something that we're definitely discussing within our student circles.
Let's turn now to Connor Cotton. Now, Connor, you run a very interesting business called Not Going to Uni. You provide information to young people who think, well, why should I go to uni? I want to go straight into work. Obviously, you don't want to see people who have chosen to university pay more in interest and feel that they're being fleeced. But what would you say to parents and to young people themselves who are thinking, should I really be paying £9,000 a year plus? And then, as Neve Robinson just says, pretty confusing and erratic interest rate charges. Shouldn't I be doing something else?
Yeah, I think there's still going to be a group of students who are going to go to university regardless of the increase in interest rates, and that's fine. We're 100% behind those students regardless. I think the biggest thing we need to do now is educate students. There's so much information out there about apprenticeships, graduate jobs, obviously undergrad and master's degrees, things like this, gap years, traineeships, first-year jobs, work experience, where it's really a time now where schools and educators parents, friends need to really go away and actually do their research, engage with things like not going to uni, engage with things like UCAS, look online, look on YouTube.
There's still a stigma though, isn't there?
100%.
If you're a parent, particularly, I come from an immigrant background, I come from Irish Catholic immigrants, the idea that the education I had, the school I had, that I wasn't going to go to university. It's like, of course you've got to go to university. That's what we're all working for. How can we destigmatise the idea of not going to uni?
Yeah, I mean, we just have to look at the market. I mean, some of the biggest employers, whether it be Ernst & Young, whether it be the Royal Air Force, who we spoke about last time I'm on here, hire school leavers without the degree. And
they get the very best school leavers, an apprenticeship from the likes of Ernst & Young, one of the big accountancy firms. From the Royal Air Force, extremely prestigious. You learn a huge amount that you can then take into civilian life if you don't choose a whole lifetime in the armed services.
And you'll get the free degree with a lot of those. So there's the degree level apprenticeships now where you get the free degree, where they're taking the cost of that degree. You're getting a salary, and often they're very well paid. If you see
pretty much a guaranteed job if they've handpicked you at 18.
Exactly, and you'll have longevity hopefully in your career going on to stay within that company for a very long time.
But there is still a stigma, Jasmine, isn't there? You know, so many parents, they're determined their kids are going to go to university in some cases because they didn't. How do we get over this kind of cultural assumption that the best people go to university, and if you don't go into university, somehow you've failed?
Yeah, I know what you mean, because I was the first person in my family to go to university, and we were all hugely proud that I was there. It was so exciting.
Some place called Cambridge,
yes, whatever, yeah. But nowadays, honestly, if I were a student or if I had children of student age, I'd be going, I wouldn't worry. Honestly, I wouldn't bother. Yeah, because unless they wanted to do something like law or medicine that you really have to have it, that's one thing. But there are more and more alternatives now. I mean, Connor's mentioned them. You've got online universities starting up. You've got all sorts of startups that are helping people within jobs. And there's more and more training. And, you look at the universities that are around, there are too many universities. I think we need fewer of them and better quality. And as you said, we need more, I think, technical colleges. We need more colleges like that are going to do vocational courses. And that's more useful to a lot of people.
Now, you're from a proud Asian background, I'm from an Irish background. We know what these immigrant parents are like, aren't we? How do we convince them that actually it might not be the best for everybody? Even you, who's a STEAM teacher, who's determined to drive social mobility in this country.
So I think, again, at parents' evenings, parents will come up, even their kids are 11, 12, 13, saying, oh, my son or daughter, I can see them in a few years going to a top university. So I think there is a long-term narrative that's going to be hard to change. But the way we can change that narrative is by showing examples of people that are capable, academically capable, but choose not to go to university.
Actively choosing not to.
And I think those examples, and again, if you look at other countries like Germany, they've got fantastic post-18 apprenticeship systems designed in place for people that are capable, but just said, actually, university is not for me. So I think there's a stigma in the UK where if people don't go to university, the assumption is, oh, you probably weren't clever enough. But that is clearly wrong. So we need to change that narrative, I think.
Or maybe get it put off for a couple of years, enable people to make some money, maybe do some investments, then they can go to university and not come out with this crippling debt.
Well, we will carry on this discussion. I know of huge interest to young people and indeed their parents. Going to university, is it still financially worth it? We got Jasmine Birtles, Bobby Seagull, we got Connor Cotton from Not Going to University. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Stay with us.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, welcome back. You're on The Money with me, Liam Halligan, on GB News TV, DAB plus digital radio and online. It's 2:20 and we are discussing a university education. Is it financially worth it? And let's go back to Niamh Robinson. She is editor-in-chief at Impact Student magazine. Niamh, do you ever get in conversations with your fellow students where people are thinking, well, you know, I was at school with somebody and they were really smart and they didn't come to university, they chose not to, now they're doing better than me. Do you get any kind of buyer's remorse, as we call it, among your fellow students?
Yes, Liam, we've absolutely had that conversation. I have personal friends who decided not to go to university and they took on an apprenticeship or went down a different route, and now they've been hugely successful. So I do completely agree there are a number of different paths you can take towards your own career success, and university is not the only option. However, I do think that what Bobby talked about in terms of the kind of social and cultural capital that can actually be built up during your time at university, whether that be through networking or through access to opportunities, I don't think that everyone has the luxury of progressing straight out of school into an apprenticeship scheme. And sometimes, you know, certain careers do require that stepping stone of university for you to actually build up your network and, you know, really catapult yourself into that working world.
Niamh, without getting too personal, did you consider not going to university? What would your parents have said if you'd have said, I don't fancy it, I'm going to do something else?
Well, I was very lucky in that my parents put no pressure on me, really. Neither of them went to university. So I had the option to kind of do whatever I wanted. I guess this is my personal sell for university here, in that I didn't know what I wanted to do. My course is actually called liberal arts. It's kind of like an American system whereby you major in something and I major in politics. And that's now led me towards this route of being really interested in media and, you know, without the opportunity to explore all of those different things, potentially in what someone else might label as a Mickey Mouse degree, I wouldn't have come to where I am today and had the opportunities to speak, you know, on some different media channels and network with different individuals. So there wasn't huge pressure in my situation. And I think actually university for me was a really beneficial experience.
Good for you, Niamh, and more power to your elbow. Connor, if there was a trend among young people towards not going to university at a time when record numbers are going to university, you would know about that trend.
Yeah, 100%.
Is there a trend?
We're seeing more. There's more and more awareness. I mean, we did a careers fair at Royal Grammar School Worcester the other day. Typically, most of the students there go to university.
School.
We were a busy stand where kids were coming up to us saying, actually, I'm not sure university's for me, and I've just found out about apprenticeships because the schools are starting to educate more. And what that means is that the kids are going, actually, there's a bigger, wider world out there.
So schools are starting to advocate to parents,
100%.
look, this is a good route. We are a good school.
We're the busiest we've ever been with schools and colleges. That paints the picture. The fact that we are the busiest we've ever been.
And Bobby, we're talking, you know, you're a maths teacher you give me a run for money when it comes to numbers. Not Jasmine, though. She's clever. Back off. She's cleverer than both of us. Probably cleverer than both of us combined. But look, fees have been £9,000 a year since 2012. I mean, the cost of living's rising. Input prices for universities are rising. They're not going to stay at £9,000 forever, are they? I mean, it's not going to be a popular decision, but at some point, some politicians are going to have to put these fees up.
Yes, again, the reality is when students go to university, they'll be paying a cost, and they have to decide, is that cost worth it? Like, again, the costs and benefits. And if they think, on balance, the prospect of getting a job, the prospect of the social, human, cultural capital outweighs the actual impact of the student loans repayments, then they'll say, yes, I'll go to Union Balance. So again, it's a weighing scale. At some stage, again, you find on the margins, as university tuition fees increase, on the margins, we all lose people. Again, some of my students will be deterred. I'm sure, again, on Wednesday in school, a student will whack an article saying, sir, I'm not going to uni now. I'll redirect them to you.
Yeah, they can come our way. They can come our
And I'll
way.
charge commission. Jasmine, your story is similar to mine. I'm the first person in my family to go to university, and for you, for me, it wasn't just about what we were learning, was it? It was a kind of social rite of passage.
Absolutely.
It was to say, we are not manual workers like our families have been for generations. Certainly, in my case, isn't that still important? Isn't this cultural side of going to university still important? Won't it generally tend to be, or in some cases, kids from, families where university is the norm who are getting these really good apprenticeships at the big accountancy firms and so on?
Well, I do wonder because, I would like to see the league tables of universities, post-university, graduates getting jobs, how much they get for their jobs. I'd like those to be made very, very clear, very open, so that everybody can see, OK, for my money, am I going to actually get a really, really good job? Is this going to impact really positively? Because a lot of universities actually don't. You spend a lot of money and you don't come out with, if you like, that social capital, really. So I think that really needs to be made very clear. And I would also, frankly, on a slightly different subject, like to see better behaviour from universities. I think that universities are eating themselves, having...
Vice-chancellors getting 400 grand?
Oh,
for what?
yes, exactly.
I mean, outrageous.
And all the strikes, I know some former students who had a horrendous time because they were constantly having the strikes. We had lockdowns. They were treated appallingly then. They're like, woke centres as well. There are a lot of problems, I think, with universities.
Really getting into gear now. Woke centres, crikey.
I actually got one point to make about social capital and what demonstrates this. So they found that students from the least disadvantaged backgrounds who get a first from the Russell Group universities actually earn less than students from a middle-class background. They get a 2-1. So that shows you it's not just a degree. There's something else at university, that social, cultural capital that people build up through family connections, their school. That still needs to be taken into account.
Very interesting. Niamh, let's go back to you. We've been talking about my life story, Jasmine's life story. You told us that you were the first in your family to go to university. You also said that your parents, to their credit, if I may be so bold, said you had a choice. I speak as a father of three myself. They let you decide what you wanted to do. But did you feel that you needed to go to university to sort of make a social leap in any sense? Was there something more at stake for you than simply what you were going to actually learn?
I think, honestly, the answer is yes, most definitely. There is a certain pressure, whether it be societal or maybe in my case internal, that I thought that university was the best route for me to progress and, actually work towards the careers that I was interested in. That doesn't mean, obviously, it's the best route for everyone. And I completely appreciate that potentially some destigmatization does need to be done around not going to university and going for a more vocational route. My parents very much outlined that to me as as a potential pathway, but I still said to them, no, I believe that university is the best option for me. So I think that makes the case even stronger that, we need to be educating students on the opportunities outside of just university institutions.
And to what extent, Niamh, do you and your fellow students become, because you are customers, because you are going to be paying these debts off yourself, in many cases, or your families are, this is money from your personal pockets. You are customers more than Jasmine and I were, with respect, when we went to world-class universities for free. So how impatient do you get with university vice-chancellors paying themselves £500,000, with lecturers striking in the eyes of some at the earliest opportunity? Or do you still give them slack in that sense?
I do think that there is a real culture of understanding within the student body at universities. It's no secret that student bodies tend to be largely left-wing, and so there is a huge sympathy with lecturers. You know, we've realised that pension schemes and pay inequality are huge issues, and that actually many of them feel pushed to strike because, you know, the UCU aren't 100% on what other, you know, options they have. But yes, there is also, on the flip side, a real growing sense of discontent amongst the student body, not necessarily directed at our lecturers, but directed higher, most definitely. University management, government, you know, at the feeling that we are paying so much, and we had, you know, effectively 2 years of online learning and, you know, huge amounts of strikes. It isn't the experience we signed up for, and we do sympathise with, you know, those trying to deliver the quality of teaching, but you know, it is very upsetting for us when it isn't necessarily meeting the standards that we had expected.
And then on top of that, 12% on your student loan. Neve Robinson of Impact Student Magazine, great to have you on the show. And indeed, in the studio, Connor Cotton of Not Going to University, Bobby Seagull, teacher extraordinaire and MissMoneyMagpie.com, Jasmine Birtles, who's cleverer than both of us put together, cleverer than you as well, all three of us. Great to have you.
Thanks.
Really interesting discussion. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, today's Money Talks interview is with Kathryn Mcbride. She's a trade economist with lots of experience in financial services, and also she's going to be analysing those UK trade deals with Australia and with New Zealand. What do they mean for consumers? What do they mean for farmers? All that and more after the GB News headlines with Townsend Roberts.
Liam, thank you. It's 2:32. Here are the headlines from the GB newsroom. The Royal Navy is taking over command from Border Force in the Channel under new government plans to tackle illegal immigration. The Prime Minister has also confirmed asylum seekers will be flown to Rwanda for processing as part of a £120 million deal. Boris Johnson says they'll have the capacity to resettle tens of thousands of people over the coming years, and that the scheme will serve as a considerable deterrent. Ambulance response times and A&E performance in England have dropped to their lowest levels on record. That's as the latest figures show 6.2 million patients are currently on NHS waiting lists, with 23,000 waiting more than 2 years to start routine treatment. Ukraine says a new prisoner swap has been agreed with Russia. 30 Ukrainians are due to return home today. Earlier, the country's military said it hit a Russian warship, Moskva, with a missile, causing serious damage. It reportedly started to sink after ammunition on board the vessel exploded. Moscow claims it's still afloat, but says crew members were evacuated from the ship. The Queen, who has for the first time missed the Royal Maundy service, is also expected to miss the Easter Sunday event because of mobility issues. The Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall represented the monarch today, handing out Maundy money to community members from across the country. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Liam will be back in just a moment.
Hello. Things are warming up for the start of the long weekend. Certainly today it's getting a little warmer out there, dry and bright for the most part. And for Good Friday, it's also looking warmer still. High pressure is in control. It's not quite sitting right over us and keeping the weather fronts completely at bay. At times, these weather fronts are going to try and push in from the west, and certainly one today is bringing more cloud and a bit of patchy rain over the Western Isles, maybe on the west coast of the mainland of Scotland, and also maybe the far north of Northern Ireland, seeing a few spots of drizzly rain. But for the vast majority, it is dry. Quite a lot of cloud this morning, but it is melting away through the afternoon, and many places seeing some sunny spells. A few coasts in the west may stay a little misty and murky, and that'll suppress the temperatures. But in the sunny spells. High teens, low 20s possible across the southeast, so really quite warm. A little bit more of that showery rain drifting northwards across northern Scotland through the evening, but for the most it'll be a dry night and a clear night. Cloud will start to increase once more across South Wales, southwest England, perhaps a little bit of mist and low cloud here and there first thing on Good Friday as temperatures drop down into high single figures, so not particularly chilly. And for most, Good Friday is looking like a dry and a bright day, probably more sunshine than today, certainly over the Midlands, northern England and northwest Scotland. Some patchy cloud further west, and we will see a lot of cloud for Northern Ireland, some showers breaking out here. 1 or 2 showers possible North Wales, and later on northern England and southern Scotland could see a heavy shower, but they'll be pretty isolated. Most places dry and temperatures 22, maybe 23 Celsius across the southeast. A little cooler on some of these eastern coasts and with a bit more cloud further west. Still 1 or 2 of those showers moving in during Friday evening across southern and then central Scotland. A possibility of a heavier shower here for a time. 1 or 2 showers possible on Saturday, but most places again dry and bright. Some rain in Northern Ireland on Sunday and turning cooler with a bit more rain around by Monday.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You are on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, the East Midlands is famous for pork pies and for red Leicester cheese, but it's also got the greatest investment growth in the UK. That's according to research by the accountancy firm Price Bailey. Since 2019, there's been a considerable increase in the amount of money invested in the UK, with the East Midlands experiencing the greatest growth, 600%. Wow! London had 91% investment growth, with Wales at 50%. These are percentage increases, not absolute levels, of course. Here to tell us more about the data and what it all means for the future of local economies, it's Chand Chadasama from Price Bailey Group. Chand, great to have you with us. 600% in the East Midlands. What's going on?
Well, it started at 1 and then went to 6. So it's quite easy to move up 600% when it works like that. I think the more important thing is what's going on overall with venture capital investment in the UK. And it is increasing. I think that's really valuable. And that's the really important part in this.
So tell us a little bit more about these numbers. I've been quite vague in the introduction, so we can drill down into them with you. What sort of investment are we talking about? You mentioned venture capital. Just explain what that is. And does this investment include existing businesses investing in their own businesses?
Yeah, that's right. So what this is equity investment made by venture capital funds into businesses which are what we would call true venture. So these are businesses which have raised less than £1.5 million of equity funding so far, and they're getting their first meaningful investment from a VC fund of £2 to £25 million. They're typically small businesses with high growth potential, not on the stock market. And it doesn't include businesses investing in themselves. This is investment from proper venture capital funds.
Yeah, viewers and listeners shouldn't be scared of this term venture capital. What it actually means, equity investment, it means is you're not lending money to a business, getting a rate of interest and being able to get the money back pretty much by law or claims on assets. This is venture capital, so you may or may not get your money back, but you may get lots more money back because you really believe in the business. It's like buying shares in a company, isn't it, before those shares actually exist on a stock exchange. So this is like the cutting edge of the economy. This is the kind of investment that really generates growth. And it's interesting to hear from you, Chand. There's a lot of bad economic news out there at the moment, but there's still a lot of that venture capital investment happening in the UK, from within the UK and from overseas as well. And it's not just in London and the southeast.
That's right. So you're absolutely right. This isn't like the £80 billion of debt that the government pumped into the economy, companies through CBILS and bounce back loans. This is people taking a real risk on the shares of unlisted businesses, and VCs do this because they think they'll make 3 to 10 times that amount in, say, 5 to 8 years. So it's proper growth investment. And the reason we care about this is because these risky investments are made by professionals into companies that really drive the economy forward. These are businesses that create technology, that hire really, really quickly and really aggressively, and that really builds companies that the whole country can be proud of. And that's why we really care about this group, because it's not quite the same as taking debt, where it's a kind of very conservative IOU nature. This is about fast growth. And London does take the vast majority of the funding. It does take about 60%, 64% to be exact, of funding. But the rest of the country, their proportion is growing too, and the growth rate out of London is far quicker. That being said, what we have found is that software businesses really do dominate across the whole of the UK. So if you're a software business in London, you've got the greatest potential of raising venture capital funding. If you're a manufacturing company in the Northeast, it's going to be far harder to attract VC funding.
Chand, well, we've just between us described and explained pretty effectively, I think, the difference between debt capital and equity capital. Has that ever happened on mainstream UK TV? I don't know, but we've done it. Tell me about stuff that's going on outside London and the southeast, not just in that silicon corridor between London and Cambridge, not just in the hotspots that we know are happening in gaming on the south coast in Bournemouth and places like that. Where else in the UK is attracting venture capital?
So the whole of the UK is attracting venture capital. And what we're seeing is that, in particular, Wales and Scotland have, through respective kind of, if you like, quasi-state-backed funds, have really invested very heavily into small but high-potential Welsh and Scottish businesses. And because, if you like, private capital has been mixed up with a little bit of state capital, that's really meant that businesses that perhaps wouldn't have otherwise got investment have really accelerated. And that tends to be sectors like manufacturing. It tends to be kind of a bit more nuts and bolts type work rather than software or biotech stuff that sits in that corridor you're describing.
Chad Osama, really good to talk to you, and I approve of having instruments in the background on any interview that happens here on The Money, and I also appreciate your careful explanation of those different forms of investment. Chad Osama there from the Price Bailey Group on booming venture capital here in the UK. You heard it here first on The Money. Now, it's the start of the bank holiday Easter weekend tomorrow, of course, and lots of people are setting off, whether it's by car, train or plane. Not me. I'm working tomorrow. I know. Don't feel too sorry for me. Anyway, with my great producers, of course, Rosie, Talia, we'll all be here slaving away to bring you a Good Friday edition of On the Money. But There is disruption over several rail services and on roads and at airports. If you are getting away for the Easter weekend, our reporter Rosie Wright has the latest from Euston train station.
It's going to be a weekend of longer journeys, fewer seats on trains, and that dreaded phrase, rail replacement bus services. Significant engineering works are being undertaken across Network Rail, and it's particularly going to hamper here. Euston Station, one of the top 10 busiest stations in the UK, closed for the entire bank holiday weekend. And for people travelling, particularly down the west coast, the advice is don't take the train. They're investing just on that one line over 22 million, and they say significant projects have to take place which will then improve the experience of the passenger. And they say the best time to do it is the bank holiday weekend because there will be fewer journeys. Of course, this is a bank holiday weekend though that's already been hampered by news of travel chaos, whether that's on the roads, 21 million leisure journeys predicted to take place, the busiest the roads have been, the RAC think, in 8 years. So if you were thinking about taking the train instead, you're going to have to check that there aren't engineering works impacting your journey. That is really significant if you're one of the football fans planning to go to the FA Cup semi-final on Saturday, because from Liverpool and Manchester City, there just aren't direct trains into Euston. Well, earlier I spoke to Network Rail and asked them what advice they have for people trying to make that route.
So we plan our engineering work 2 years out and advise all the big players, including the FA, of what's going on our main lines into the major cities around the country. So they can, where they can, plan around that. Unfortunately, I understand that they couldn't do that this time, and we've been working with them behind the scenes to lay on alternative services, a bit of rail, a bit of bus, a bit of combination to ensure that fans can still enjoy the match this weekend. But the vast majority of the network is completely unaffected by upgrade work.
So is it the FA's fault? You're saying you gave them ample notice of the fact that there'd be engineering work this weekend?
I don't think anybody's interested in a blame game here, but we did give them really lots of notice about what was happening on the railway. Obviously, they couldn't predict who was going to be in the semi-final, and it is frustrating, we understand that, and we've tried to work around it as best we can.
So that's the advice for anyone wanting to get to the game in person. But if you're getting the train to travel, let's say to the airport, there's going to be fewer trains arriving into Gatwick as well, so have a look at that. Also, the Piccadilly line normally services Heathrow terminals. That's not going to be operating this weekend. So on the first bank holiday weekend, the proper public holiday where we haven't had significant coronavirus restrictions, when everyone's eager to get away, whether it's by plane, by boat, by car or by train, expect delays and prepare in advance.
Well, we know the country's finally escaped the pandemic because there's travel chaos. Welcome to Britain. Time now for my daily interview series. It's Money Talks, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Kathryn Mcbride, a regular on the Money panellist, friend of the show, and that means she really knows her stuff. Otherwise, she wouldn't be here. Kathryn is a highly experienced economist and financial analyst. She's a fellow at the Centre for Brexit Policy. She's a trade expert, and she supported Britain leaving the European Union. Well, behind the scenes, away from the news tsunami, the UK has recently signed a trade deal with Australia. That was in December 2021. We signed a trade deal with the Kiwis, New Zealand, in February 2022. And here she is in the studio, Katherine Mcbride, to explain those trade deals. She is my latest guest on Money Talks.
It's good to be back.
Kathryn, great to have you on the show. And you've been slaving away on these trade deals, haven't you? You've actually, the government, we should say, the Department for International Trade, asked you to come in and give them the benefit of your expertise scrutinising these trade deals.
Well, not all of them. I was on a panel of about a dozen people who were scrutinising the agricultural section of the Australian deal. We published our report to government last week, and it was tabled in Parliament yesterday. So we're now allowed to talk about it. We discovered that there were no problems with the Australian deal as concerns UK law or UK animal SPS,
the health and safety standards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The sanitary and phytosanitary regulations or animal welfare regulations or anything that would block this trade deal from going through. It will now go through being scrutinised by politicians and hopefully be ratified But that is a slow process. We are unlikely to be seeing increased goods from Australia until next year, which is very depressing when you listen to GBNews talking about increases in food prices, because the other problem with this trade deal is that the things that Australia produces most efficiently are seeing the tariffs lowered and the quotas increased very slowly over about 15 years for beef.
Those quotas letting more of that Aussie beef, more produce in general, come to the UK.
Tariff-free,
the tariffs being the charges on those imports for Aussie producers.
Because our tariffs are incredibly high. Right now, chilled beef's average tariff is 38.7%.
Wow.
And sheep meat
That's a tax on exporting goods from Australia into the UK.
Yes, and sheep meat is 42.7%. And frozen beef is 55.4%.
That's really high. I had no idea they were that high.
And that's why. And then they say, "Oh, well, they only import about 1,000 tons." You're going, I can't believe they.
So those tariffs are going to be eroded, whittled away over a number of years.
That's the average tariff, but the actual tariff depends on the cut of the beef, and it has two tariffs. One is a percentage of the cost, and the other is a straight. So many pounds a kilo tariff added as well. So they are very, very high. This was put in place by the EU to protect EU farmers.
That's the customs union, the EU's customs union that we've talked about, you and me, over the years so much. And how quickly will those tariffs be eroded? Over a number of years, decades?
Yes. Unfortunately, 15 years, 10 years probably, you'll see the maximum quota will be cut. But they still have, for another 5 years, they'll have the ability to limit the amount that comes in if they feel it is affecting UK farmers.
So if you are a British farmer, you're farming beef, you're farming lamb, whatever it is, should you be concerned about these Australian and New Zealand trade deals, the impact on your livelihood? And similarly, if you're a consumer looking for the price of food to come down, should you be expecting those reductions anytime soon?
Yeah, well, if you're a consumer, you should be concerned that MPs have not done anything for you, and you should be complaining to your MP about why it's taking so long to cut these costs, because they are massive. And if you're a UK farmer, you're already not producing enough to feed this nation. We import 45% of the food and drink that we consume each year. The International Meat Trade Association have done some calculations, and they think we would need another 1.5 million cattle to feed the UK, 5 million more sheep, and 1.5 billion more chickens.
1,500 million more chickens?
Yes, if we were to be self-sufficient in food. Now, we do not have...
That's a lot of wings.
Well, we don't have the space and we don't have the feed, because even if you're keeping all of those animals in sheds in very intensive production methods, which we do with chickens already, you have to import the feed.
Now, you are an economist. You're very expert in trade. You're originally from Australia. You obviously live here now. You're a very internationally minded person. What would you say to me if I said that Britain needs to produce more of its own food in order to secure, food supplies? Food security, like energy security, has rocketed up the political agenda in the light of this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Is there any merit in that argument?
Well, we would have to change our diets completely and go back to the sort of thing we were eating 200 years ago. In fact, probably 400 years ago. The UK has been importing food for a long time. So you could forget, your bananas, your oranges, your pineapples, all of that stuff, that's gone. You could live on cabbages and cauliflowers and, carrots.
Quince. Medlar fruits.
Medlars, and you would also, as I said, we have a much bigger population. Even, post-war or when we joined the EU...
In the early 70s.
In the early 70s, we're importing a lot of our food from the colonies, from Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, Canada. We still import most of our wheat from Canada, And we do get a lot from the Ukraine.
But have we got enough land? I mean, the state of our arable land, a lot of it's set aside, isn't it?
Oh, it's going to get worse too, because the government...
what sort of share of UK arable land is set aside, not being used, do you think?
Well, it's about... was comparing it once to New Zealand, and I did look at this, and it's about 70% of UK land is used in agriculture at the moment. Now, New Zealand, when they stopped subsidising their farmers, which the UK has still not done, they dropped from about 60% of their land being used for agriculture to about 40%. But the bits that were being used for agriculture were being used a lot more effectively. And so they got rid of a lot of the marginal land which was not being used properly. Now, the UK is talking about lowering its payments for just having land. The unfortunate thing is the basic subsidy from the EU that we inherited just gave you money for owning the land. Provided you had like 12 cows on it, you could get money per hectare. But they're now moving to what they call the countryside stewardship scheme, where they will pay them to grow wildflowers or, you know, plant trees, which will take a lot of land out of production, but I'm hoping it'll take the marginal land out rather than the really good quality arable land. But if we keep increasing our population, we're not, we can't feed ourselves. You know, get over it.
Katherine, these are huge issues. We'll get you back on the money soon to carry on discussing food security. That's all we've got time for now. It's great to have you on as our Money Talks guest. As you say, these New Zealand and Aussie trade deals with the UK are going to take years to come fully into effect, and we will be discussing them here on The Money with Kathryn Mcbride and other people who really know their stuff. That's all we got time for today. Thanks for joining me for this 2-hour On The Money special here on GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On The Money.
Hello. Things are warming up for the start of the long weekend. Certainly today it's getting a little warmer out there, dry and bright for the most part. And for Good Friday, it's also looking warmer still. High pressure is in control. It's not quite sitting right over us and keeping the weather fronts completely at bay. At times, these weather fronts are going to try and push in from the west, and certainly one today is bringing more cloud and a bit of patchy rain over the Western Isles, maybe on the west coast of the mainland of Scotland, and also maybe the far north of Northern Ireland, seeing a few spots of drizzly rain. But for the vast majority, it is dry. Quite a lot of cloud this morning, but it is melting away through the afternoon, and many places seeing some sunny spells. A few coasts in the west may stay a little misty and murky, and that'll suppress the temperatures. But in the sunny spells, high teens, low 20s possible across the southeast, so really quite warm. A little bit more of that showery rain drifting northwards across northern Scotland through the evening, but for the most, it'll be a dry night and a clear night. Cloud will start to increase once more across South Wales, southwest England, perhaps a little bit of mist and low cloud here and there first thing on Good Friday as temperatures drop down into high single figures, so not particularly chilly. And for most, Good Friday is looking like a dry and a bright day, probably more sunshine than today, certainly over the Midlands, northern England and northwest Scotland. Some patchy cloud further west, and we will see a lot of cloud for Northern Ireland, some showers breaking out here. 1 or 2 showers possible North Wales, and later on Northern England and southern Scotland could see a heavy shower, but they'll be pretty isolated. Most places dry and temperatures 22, maybe 23 Celsius across the southeast. A little cooler on some of these eastern coasts and with a bit more cloud further west. Still 1 or 2 of those showers moving in during Friday evening across southern and then central Scotland. A possibility of a heavier shower here for a time. 1 or 2 showers possible on Saturday, but most places again dry and bright. Some rain in Northern Ireland on Sunday and turning cooler with a bit more rain around by Monday.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of